Ritter. I'm from Hamburg, and it is my honor to first introduce you to my co-chair and first speaker. It's Henry Johannes Greten from Heidelberg. He's one of the most experienced teachers and practitioners in Chinese medicine in Germany, and he has also is also the head of the University Master Program at the University of Porto, where he produces a lot of research, and he will give us an overview about the Chinese medicine, diagnostic and treatment and research. Johannes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben, for this nice introduction. Thank you everybody for coming here. When it comes to biopiracy, everybody is talking about money and reimbursement. So as everybody does so, I won't. I would just like to tell you another aspect of why biopiracy even may be harmful to those people that exploit other cultural knowledge. And therefore, I will use the example of Chinese medicine to explain my thesis, which is that if we just steal the molecules, like in a quarry, from a quarry, then we will not have the full benefit of the molecules by losing the indicative knowledge and pharmacognostic knowledge of other cultures. So this is a quarry, as you see. A quarry is a place where you take stones to build up something new. Well, normally you can also take the stones from other buildings, which results in destruction. Well, taking molecules from other cultural backgrounds and diagnostic systems may be even harmful for these systems, but it will also not tell us the relations of stone to stone, if you like, within the original architecture, so we lose some of the knowledge that is inherent. So that's why I want to give you a quick survey of what I want to speak about. First, we would focus on TCM diagnosis and see that by taking over plants from that background without understanding the diagnostic background, we lose some indications. Not speaking of that we damage Chinese medicine as a medical system. Second, we can understand Chinese medicine not only as a mystical philosophy, but also as an early model of system biology. And I would like to give you some extremely quick and brief overview on that. And of course, we can show also some examples of how we understood these plants by ancient pharmacognostic knowledge. So let me go right into the matter and give you a little example. If you go and collect some plants from somewhere, normally you have some guide, some botanic professor, and some medical people who know what's right or wrong to take with you. So you take home what they consult you, and you would normally take the sample and write down something like, this is good against common cold, for instance. Well, in Chinese medicine, we don't have this kind of diagnosis. So you would, for instance, categorize this totally differently. For instance, we have one of these entities that is, in fact, driven by something that the Chinese call cold. But in fact, it's a vegetative medicine, and we know that what they call cold is a vegetative pattern of functions. So if you say this cold comes from the agent cold, then you would normally also indicate that you have a local deficiency of microcirculation, you have a lack of defensive power, like a lack of innate immunology. You would have, for instance, symptoms like dry nose, or the mesoarterioles are closed. By the way, that's why you put red light on the nose, so as to alleviate the symptoms. This is believed to be caused by adhesion molecules of the endothelium. And we know that along with this diagnosis, we have stiff muscles because lacks of microcirculation lower the temperature so as to actin and myosin filaments are not dissolved properly. So this results in stiffness. But a common cold can also be totally different. For instance, if it is something that we would call a draft-like disease, sometimes translated as wind, which is a very problematic kind of translation. And under these circumstances, we could see that totally different kind of mechanisms are involved, like increased microcirculation, because we have an inflammatory situation with a high degree of innate immunity. We would not have a dry but a running nose. We would see that mesoarterioles are widely open, and we have a lot of involvement of mast cells and the substance P mast cell mechanism. And that would mean that we have burning kind of symptoms within the nose and a high sympathetic tonus and rather spastic muscles. So you have crampy versus stiff muscles. It's totally different. So if you take a plant for both conditions, so to speak, you would sure not choose the right kind of test after that. So we would just say, okay, take the molecule, take the stone out of the quarry, and we'll put it in the lab, and if there's something we'll find out, you may lose most of the indication. Well, possibly that's a great possibility to do a repurposing after you did all that, but that will take some years, as normally is done. Also, you have a lot of problems with the patents that are put on with off-label usage and so forth. So if you just take the molecule, you are unable to get what the plant does. Therefore, we need to understand a bit more of Chinese medicine. In fact, it's possible to understand Chinese medicine a little deeper. This knowledge was still inherent in the 16th, 17th century, probably, but not to everybody. So if you look to some of the schools that we see now in China, most of that is not even taught anymore, which is a clear indication that Chinese medicine also was damaged by the process of taking piece out of the quarry and build it into a new system. So two terms of Chinese medicine are especially important. One is called the taste, and the second heat and cold. And I would just like to show you what that may mean and why it's so difficult to understand this kind of indication. First of all, we know that all Chinese medicine is based on yin and yang, but not many people know that this is a binary numbering system. It was found out in the 17th century by the famous mathematician Leibniz, who would find that yang and yin lines exist within the I Ching, the oldest book of mankind, and that we would put this in Chinese medicine in circular arrays like here, so as to describe circular processes within nature. Such a circular process is important because also regulation as a technical process is circular. So I would like to demonstrate that briefly. This is a water basin here that would have a target temperature. This is hot, this is cold, target temperature. And when you go and see this as an incubator in your lab, you would go in the morning, it has 20 degrees, but the target value should be 37 maybe. So you switch on the system, and then you see that temperature rises because the temperature is lower than target. But where the target value is passed here, then the heater will be switched off, and after heat will heat it higher than it should be. Just like in your living room when you have a thermostat, it's never the right temperature, you know, it's either too warm or too cold. So that happens here too. When you go lower in target value, then you would need some latency until the heater gives heat again. And therefore, you have a certain low. So high and low, yang and yin, are following each other. And as you see, this is a sinus wave, which is actually a circular process. See, this is a circular process. Yeah, the wheel that you turn by the hand. If you do it like this, yang is upward, yin is downward. And if you go, it's a sinus wave. See? It is, therefore, this here is that here, right? So this is the same mathematically, just projected from a different angle. Therefore, the target value can be put in here as points, and the so-called phases, wood, fire, metal, water, are these bigrams, these numbers from 1 to 4, and the names of these bigrams 1 to 4 changed in the 3rd pre-Christian century, as we know from the scriptures. Now, if you want to put it all in one sign, because Chinese do that all the time, you see this sign that everybody knows. So this sign here actually says that regulation is a circular process which follows a sinus wave and which has target values. So as you see, it's not so mystical, it's rather a bit technical. However, these insights were more or less lost and may have survived in some places. You can also apply that to man, and then you see that the vegetative system also has an up and down with a concert of transmitters that steer the body. So if you see these icons up there, these are the clinical pictures that are called liver, heart, lung, and kidney, but they are actually not organs that we mean by that, but patterns, vegetative patterns, with involvement only of parts of the body. So if you say liver, in Chinese medicine you may mean something going on here, but normally it has to do with a sympathetic overdrive that has the stomach pattern against it, the earth pattern, because that is a vagal. So we can translate Chinese medicine into vegetative mechanisms, giving us the possibility to understand the indications of pharmaca a little closer. So then we can describe these patterns in detail, and we can even say there are patterns for down and up regulation, which are called earth. All this, of course, was written down in a couple of books that we produced here. Also, we could show in the first ever double-blinded clinical acupuncture that acupuncture studies, that in these studies we could show that acupuncture, according to this pattern of point selection, we can double the effect of acupuncture in comparison to what is conventional. Therefore, we can be sure that there is some relevance of this theory, and the problem is now how to apply that to pharmaca. And here you have the same curve, but there are so-called flavors or tastes like bitter, sweet, and sour that you see here, and they are just actions of pharmaca that are directed against these vegetative patterns or to support the body in auto-regulation. And therefore, if something is, let's say, sour as a medication, it may mean that it's anti-sympathetic up to the degree that it would be going down so far that it would even reach the metal point here, which makes it also possible that it acts on the opposite side of the diagram, for instance on the surface of the body. So the same applies for pungent, neutral, and salty, of course. And therefore it is relatively easy to predict how an agent may react within the body and induce effects within the body. And that makes things a little bit less, let's say, blind, and searching is a relatively precise process. So this is about what people call fullness or emptiness, which means more vegetative stimulation with all these different directions, or less vegetative stimulation. However, there's also a central term called heat, which we could also examined the last years, I could show in some studies that basically you can describe that as a general increase in microcirculation, not as far as in fever, but let's say tendentially into the direction of fever. So heat does not necessarily go along with fever, but it goes along with a lot of mechanisms that we know of centralization in anesthesiology. So we can exactly say what heat is and also what cold would mean. And therefore, we could possibly be able to find a couple of issues within and features of plants. So this is a mathematical model, if you like, but we do not only have this vegetative curve, we also have this heat and cold curve, because also that's regulated. And they interact, of course, like microcirculation and vegetative system always interacts. Further, there is a model of defense in the book called Shanghan Lun, which also can be shown as a vegetative curve. So we also have a curve of defense. Plus, we would also have a curve and an influence of general stability of the system. So the regulatory stability of the system is indicated by something that is called yin or substrate in this case. It is the amount of functional tissue that has to be regulated and therefore can be influential on the other curves. So we can also simplify that by a couple of mathematical transformations that I won't do today. We come to this Sheng and Ko cycle, which is certainly a reductionist kind of version of Chinese medicine. Clever made, but reductionist. And for the purpose of distributing this into the wide country, I believe that is a perfect model to do. However, when it comes to quality control or research, that may be less indicative. So we can see some examples of that. Here we see, for instance, Coptis rhizoma that we examined a couple of years ago. Here we see the nuclei of the cell counterstained in blue, and here we have the same cell culture, but we put TNF alpha on it. We, so to speak, have a little inflammatory-like reaction, and you see that all these counterstained nuclei are now full by translocation of NF-kappa B, and when we put Coptis extract on it, then we are ready to prevent that reaction, as the translocation doesn't take place anymore. This is in full compliance with the model I showed before. Also, macrophages can be inhibited by that, which also directly can be linked to the Chinese medical description. And therefore, I believe that if we understand the host medicine and the diagnostic criteria under which these plants make sense, then we would have much more of that. Biopiracy is just stealing from a quarry. But those people that steal it will lose the full benefit by not understanding how the indications actually work. Thank you for your attention.